Alright everyone, we have midterm recap day 4 now because we have several more races that have been called. Several of them are quite important. And then we have several continuing races. We're not expected to have full results. Well, in one of them there's a runoff. We've got to wait 4 weeks. That's Walker v. Warnock. I'll talk about that. We have Boebert v. Frisch, actually, in Colorado's 3rd District. Boebert, of course, Lauren Boebert, hyper-MAGA candidate. Yes, she's ultra-MAGA. She leads by about 1,000 votes with everything pretty much tallied up. She will go in with an advantage into the final yards of the election. The problem is, of course, the recount law there. Could we suspect that maybe the recount will go a little bit in the other direction, depending on who's counting the ballots? Possibly, although having a 1,000 vote lead, that's comfy enough, I think. They'd have to go out of their way to screw her at this point. Although they claim that she screwed people for money in years past, this was never labeled sexist, by the way, despite the fact that it's been completely debunked. Interesting how liberals can get away with calling women sluts effectively, which is literally what they claimed about Boebert. Well, she fucked Ted Cruz to get her job. Well, it never actually happened, but your shoops were interesting. You know, I guess there was a prostitute or something that looked vaguely similar, and they were trying to uphold that as being real, and of course it wasn't. Anyway, that's going to run off, which is unfortunate, but I think she has an advantage in the end, probably maintains her seat. That would have been a big pickup, by the way, for the Dems. I have no doubt that they pulled out all the stops at every level that they possibly could to try to knock her off her pedestal because she's so loyal to the MAGA movement. We also have an interesting story from Nevada, where Lombardo has indeed knocked off the Dem incumbent Sisolak to take the gubernatorial slot. The Republicans just swiped the gubernatorial slot in the state of Nevada. Now, of course, Laxalt is still locked in a near 50-50 in the Senate race there. Here's the tale of two candidacies. Laxalt as being more MAGA, I think, and more out there about it than Lombardo, certainly Joe Lombardo, of course now incoming governor there, is struggling to hit that gap. Whereas Lombardo, you've already got the votes tallied. It was far enough away that they've been able to actually call a winner. It was a few extra points. What's the difference between these two fucking candidates? Lombardo was never targeted or thrown under the bus by the GOPE neocon ink swords, by the Shapiros and Coulters of the party. He got a pass. Yeah, he's MAGA, Ted Cruz-ish sense, but at least vaguely MAGA. Meanwhile, in the Senate, where Mitch McConnell did not want MAGA candidates winning and deliberately screwed them, you had a little bit less money going to the Senate election bid of Laxalt there. He possibly still is going to get over the margin. He does have a slim lead, just to be clear, going into the final rung of counting. We're just not sure what's going to happen. He might have an advantage, but it's an underwhelming one. It's like a 55-45 proposition. I still favor him and predicted that he would win, but it's not counted yet. But in the gubernatorial slot, things were far enough away that we've already got it counted. We know that the Republicans took it. If they had put just as much effort into the Senate race as into the gubernatorial race, they would already be 50-50 in the Senate. You wouldn't have to worry about Walker v. Warnock. You wouldn't have to worry about whether the evil MAGA Shabaka wins in Alaska. You wouldn't have even cared about Arizona, where, of course, the other day, Blake Masters did lose. Again, because the Uniparty decided to effectively ignore him and withdraw funding. They spent a few $100,000 on that race. They spent $9 million big ones for Murkowski v. Shabaka in Alaska, in a race where you've got two Republicans running against each other. You literally can't lose it, but Mitch McConnell didn't want to have to deal with Lisa Murkowski not being there and another MAGA Republican. This was really an election tale of the Senate, more than anything else. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell are centrally responsible for what happened there, and of course Joe McCarthy's lack of leadership as far as certain House races. The Republicans, by the way, are picking up the majority of the outstanding races right now and are on track to control the House. But they screwed several candidates in so doing. Now, they could have had an extra 5 to 10 pickups quite easily, but they decided to ignore or even sabotage multiple House candidates, the same as they did with several senators. We also have, of course, I think the big political race of the next few weeks, Walker v. Warnock. Now, this is Georgia. It went to runoff, as I predicted. Walker has a very slight advantage. I think it was by 0.4 or something like that. He does have more votes than Warnock, Going into the runoff election, that's a big advantage. If you have any excess of votes at all, assuming that the people that turned out to vote for you the first time voted exactly the same level, in theory, you should get it. Warnock, meanwhile, is raising massive amounts of money and trying to put his final messaging out there. It'd be funny if there were an additional debate. That would be hilarious, I think. Here's the problem. I still think Warnock will win, albeit narrowly. I think that the third-party voters that didn't want to hold their nose for either mainline candidate will break for Walker in the end. If you're voting for the Libertarian Party, I have a feeling that Herschel Walker is at least slightly more credible to you than Raphael Warnock. That's just my feeling. And of course, he does go in with a few thousand extra votes. That helps. That's what I believe. But the Republicans, if they had done just one thing, this has nothing to do with the Uniparty, by the way, I'm just putting an ideological slant in here, could have run away with this race because of the outsized importance of one particular issue that the GOP effectively abandoned despite winning on months before the election. Education is a goddamn big thing down in Georgia. That was one of the main issues there, in Virginia, and in certain other states. Critical race theory. By the way, Critical Race Theory Debunked by yours truly, available on Amazon.com. Just putting that out there. Sold about 5,000 copies of it. I must be doing something right. Looking at that race, with education being, in Georgia especially, outsizedly and proportionally important, the GOP decided instead to pivot solely to talking about the economy. Now that's fine, you're winning on the economy, but not everyone in Georgia happens to be suffering right now as far as the economy goes. The Bidenomic economy is shit, but I mean for someone in the upper middle class, they can grin and bear it. But they may have kids in school, and they expect them to get a good education. Why their kids are in a public school at that point, I don't know why, but they're there anyway. That is a babysitting service to some people. So their kids are in school. They're worried about critical race theory. Parents are showing up to school boards, finally looking into the educational system's finer workings and realizing that the far left has screwed around with it and turned it into communism. This was a goddamn huge winning issue. Walker did talk about it a few times. Warnock backed into a corner, did sort of like the Virginia Democrats did and said, no, it's not happening in this school, and if it were, it would be a virtue. But they didn't run with it as a message. They didn't prop up Walker with ads recounting his views on education or something like that. So we have multiple races called. We have several major ones still outstanding. Again, at the end of the day, I think Boebert does go across the finish line, albeit by a very small margin. Doesn't necessarily show her strength of campaigning, although again, I would remind you that the MAGA candidates were effectively abandoned by the House Republicans and by their fellow senators in some of these races. Lombardo has won. That's a big GOP pickup in the gubernatorial sense. We're still waiting on Arizona, and it might be fucking next year before we know what the fuck happened. They need automatic recount laws if they're going to have, slim margins and midnight drops of ballots. I think Kari Lake is still behind by a few thousand votes, but it's basically a 50-50 sum game. Blake Masters, of course, has been called as having lost over there. That's not a surprise. He was running behind Lake in the polling. And again, the GOP decided not to fund him. We're still waiting on Alaska results. I have no clue what's happening there. I don't know if it goes to another round of runoff with just two candidates or if the winner wins. I don't even know. Arizona's system has become so convoluted it looks worse than goddamn Arizona. I think Alaska should just use the Arizona system. At the very least, then people can make memes about ballot printers or something. In Alaska, somehow they've managed to take a bad idea and make it fucking worse. That's about all. Peace out.